Dear God, I am now ready for you to help in removing from me the defects of character which I now realise are an obstacle to my recovery. Help me to continue being honest with myself and guide me towards spiritual and mental health. Amen. Okay, so it's with much love and gratitude that the group welcomes Myers R. And Myers has come to share with us this evening. Over to you, Myers.
Katie, thank you. It's always a treat to see you guys. Purdy, thanks for the invite. It's we got to talk about this tent thing. I just, if a tent's got some skanky stuff around it, you're supposed to leave it alone and go get another one. Okay, I'll send you some funds. We just like, God love you. The For those I haven't met, my name is Myers Raymer. I'm a very grateful, recovered alcoholic and dope fiend from Central Texas and in the middle of nowhere. And I had my last bout with all that crap in January the 15th of '88. And gosh, I'm truly grateful to be here. It's so funny. I was talking to some people earlier today, and they asked me. They said, "Myers, what's the lowest time of your life?" Because they know something about my history. And I told them, I said, believe it or not, the lowest time of my life was not when I was mixed up in booze and dope. The lowest time of my life was 7 years in AA, trying to figure out a way to make it all work. I'm going to 6 meetings a week, and I can't connect any dots. I'm too lazy to work the steps. I'm too goofy to get a sponsor that knows what he's doing. So I'm 7 years sober, and I don't even know who the co-founders of Alcoholics Anonymous were. I don't know anything really about this except how to. I'm a poster boy of how we stay sober one day at a time and nothing else. And I tell you all that because I want you to understand that it took me a while to finally get low enough in the room to finally reach out for some help. And I was introduced to some crusty old guys in Dallas who, amazingly enough, loved me enough right off the bat to try to get me qualified, which was fascinating, to be 7 years in the program, and nobody ever qualified me. So I'm in and out. I'm the classic guy of thinking one thing, and then 2 days later I'm scratching my head going, well, maybe not. Maybe I'm not that guy. Maybe I'm not. I run a business, and I've got my name on the side of the building. I've got stuff. I've got. So maybe I'm not like these folks, and they're telling stories of doing things that I never dreamed of doing. And y'all understand the circle you can get in. You can kind of get into this weird deal. And so I'm telling you this, I'm sharing this part of this with you because I want you to understand that when we talk about the steps, I tend to be really passionate about the steps and about the results of the steps. Maybe hypersensitive would be a better word, because I've seen what middle of the road playing games with this stuff is like, and I've seen the results of that. And then when I finally realized that there was a more prolific way of doing this, that there was that the moment I started studying the text, one of the things that crept up and tapped me on the shoulder and made me turn around and look at things from a different perspective was this idea that maybe I'd been selling myself short with this thing called the steps. Maybe I was just playing games with this stuff. Maybe I bought into the idea that if I just go to enough meetings, I'm going to be okay. It's funny, anecdotally, if we took a vote, we won't, but if we just took a vote and goes, okay, how many of you thought that if you got rid of booze and dope, you'd be okay? And 90% of people would raise their hand. I'm 110% convinced that my problem is booze and methamphetamines. And all I got to do is get that stuff out of the way, and I'm going to be okay. Imagine my surprise when 3 or 4 years into this deal of sobriety, I find myself doing some crazy, creepy things and thinking crazy, creepy things. And I mean, I'm buying stuff I don't need. I'm talking. It's hard to explain how how goofy I was. And my family were the first to know. I mean, my kids were terrified of me. My wife was like, okay, how about we do this? How about you sleep in the little bedroom down the other end of the hall, and I'll sleep in the big bed down on this end of the hall, and we'll see if we can't work this out down the road. And this is 4 years sober. And I'm a suicidal mess, and I'm trying to figure out how to do all this stuff. And there was a day when I finally sat there looking out the window, and I went, if this is what sobriety looks like, if this is all I'm going to have is staying sober one day at a time, I don't want it. I'd rather do something else. So, but because there's a couple of guys that are new in here that we were talking to right before the meeting like that. And I want to make sure that you're real clear on what I'm saying like that. You can soft sell this whole program, these steps. I'm obviously setting this up for where we're going in this conversation. But you can set yourself up to this middle of the road kind of AA light thing if that's what you want to do. But I want to be the guy, and hopefully a lot of people on this Zoom would be the same person that would look at you and go, dude, I'm concerned. I'm concerned that you're heading down a road that's got a big dead end into it. Because the only thing waiting for you at the end of this road is you. And you don't want that. What you want is this more profound experience with this work. And so once I began to piece together the steps, and I began to piece together all of the things that I had just written off and discounted as not important, I remember a speaker years ago, I think it was Mark Houston, but I'm not sure, talked about this idea of old ideas and these old ideas that stand between us and a new experience. And some of us can get quite demonstrative about this. I won't do this. I won't do this. I've got a buddy in South Carolina or North Carolina that's one of the finest graphic artists I've ever met, and Dave Russell, and he's got an Etsy website, and he's pretty fascinating. But he sent me a poster one time, and it said the definition of a newcomer: desperate but picky. And I remember thinking about it, and I went, how true, desperate but picky. I don't want to drink. I don't want to go to that crazy house again. I don't want to do crazy stuff like this. But I think what I'll do is I'll just do this little meeting thing here, and maybe I'll do this, but I'm going to wait on those steps. They seem pretty harsh and pretty direct. And I think I probably need to get healthier first. And we hear this over and over. I've been listening to it for 37 years. People saying this stuff like this. And it's after a while, you'll crawl up in your head and you'll start selling yourself the idea that this is real, that this is what you need to be doing. God love us. It's a miracle that some of us make it, and certainly it was a miracle that I made it into this deal. So let me set this up. What is fascinating, I think maybe the most fascinating thing about studying the text and looking at stuff that we're looking at, is that as you begin to study it, the first thing is you're going to realize that Bill and Bob and the first 100 meant for us to get more out of this than just being sober one day at a time. There was more there. The dialogue repeats itself. The reoccurring themes tell us that over and over. I used to have a guy in an AA meeting when I first got sober, that first group that I was a member of, and he every day he would introduce himself. He'd go, "My name's Steve, and I'm sober today." And we just sit there and look at him like this. And at the time, I just went, well, he's just trying to be modest or whatever. I don't. In the words of my buddy Mickey Bush, so's the cat. If your goal is to be sober one day at a time, you're missing all the cool stuff. And that's the reason why I think it's so important that we look at this. I want to tell you a real quick story, and you'll understand after I get into it why I'm telling you the story. But we were selling our bindery. I'm a book binder by trade, and we were selling our big bindery in Dallas, and I wasn't really sure what we were going to do. And so I took a job working part-time for a treatment center down on Padre Island, right down close to the border of Texas and Mexico. And I'd go down there for 10 days, stay down there, teach Big Book, and then I'd go back to Dallas. And I thought I was going to do that for a year, and I ended up doing it for 8 years. And it was sort of just a magic experience. And so, I was down there on one of my trips, and we used to take all of our patients that were there on the island. We'd take them to this meeting on Saturday night. It was a candlelight meeting with a bunch of winter Texans, people that would come down from the north and stay warm, and it was always fun to see them like this. But there was this guy named Dave. Dave's passed away years ago, and I still kind of talk about him, but the Dave was a crusty old bastard that was at that time he'd been sober for like 37 years, and he would always be the last guy to share. He would always wait till the end, and then he would jump in and he would share something. And most of the time, it was cray stuff. It was like he was crazier than me. I mean, he was just like nuts, and just like, and so he's telling us this story about being on the beach down there with a dog that was not on a leash, which is not a good thing down there. And they called the police, and the police came down, and it got into a goofy, contention with the police and stuff. And it had nothing to do with what we'd been talking about. It had nothing to do with recovery. It was just a story Dave was telling. And so he ranted for about 15 minutes talking about his day on the beach with this dog. And so I'm scooting forward in my seat. I'm getting ready to say something because I'm so irritated. I'm about to explode. And he puts up his hand like this, and he goes, and before one of you big book thumpers jumps in and says something, I just want to remind you, there's nothing in this book about how to live your life. And I literally have steam coming out of my ears. I mean, I can't even begin to describe how emotional I was because of the ridiculous nature of the things that he said. Matter of fact, at Big Book the next morning, everybody was going, Myers, you did such a good job. I thought you were going to kill Dave. And I thought, well, I probably would have, but anyway, it's a long story. Y'all understand what I'm saying like that. So here's the deal. Here's a guy, 37 years in the rooms, telling everybody in this huge meeting, there's probably 120 people in the meeting, that the book has nothing to do with how to live your life. The book was about how to stay sober one day at a time. So let me make sure that everybody's clear, especially some of you rascals that are new. There's nothing in our text that says that we're supposed to stay sober one day at a time. Our literature, our book says that we stay sober for good and for all, and we live life one day at a time. It's a pretty big difference in the way that is. Now, after Bill Wilson died in 1971, they started printing a bunch of brochures that had one day at a time stuff in there. Most of them were written by folks that weren't in the program. They were just people that were trying to be helpful, and they wrote these brochures. But it began to paint this picture that if we would just go to enough meetings, we would be okay, and that we would be fed the things that we need to be fed, and that we would be okay. Well, everything lined up except the success rates, because the success rates anecdotally and statistically never lined up, and it was problematic. And this is the reason why over the years I've been so amazingly excited. I'm talking like a little kid at Christmas time about how many book studies have started up, especially during COVID, that stayed. They started and then just stayed and then just stayed. And pretty soon there were tens of thousands of people that were, for the very first time, were hearing the steps. We're hearing what it is that we're here to study. And it's just amazing, really, truly amazing. So as you study the text, what you begin to see quickly is that these steps enlighten us as we move through. Look at Silkworth introduces us to a physical part. This is all real quick, and you'll understand why I'm talking about it. Silkworth talks in the doc's opinion, talks about primarily 98% of it is about the physical allergy, which was such a surprising deal. And then we'll get into Bill's story, which starts out with just story stuff, but then all of a sudden on page 9, when Ebby shows up, it shifts completely, and it shifts towards this repeat ideas of, hey, wait a minute, maybe there is a creator in the middle of this that could get us through not only the physical part, but the mental part, which is the stumbling block for so many of us. Let me ask you, how many of y'all, if you were really honest with yourself, how many of y'all really recognize how insane it is to quit, get sober, be sober, and then drink again? Or find yourself at the ATM knowing that you're getting ready to go someplace else, knowing that you're going to do that. I mean, this is what the definition of insanity looks like. I can have a job, I can have a great gal, I can have a great car, I can have all the stuff, but I'm still doing insane things around this. And so Bill sets this stuff up beautifully. They take us from Bill's story to There's a Solution and more about alcoholism, where they absolutely annihilate us with this profound idea that there is a mental piece of this that we need to deal with, that left on our own devices, we are not going to be successful. We simply are not going to think our way through this. There's no, if I just pull up my pants and just be a big boy, I'm going to be okay. Well, I mean, I know it sounds good, but most of us, this is where a great deal of shame and guilt and remorse comes from that follows us around forever. That's because everybody else we know, normies, can do this without any problem at all. They can just set this stuff aside. Recreationally, I'll use it until it gets to be a problem. Then I'm done. How nice for you. Because I'm living a walking nightmare. Bill introduces us, when we get over to page 60 to 63, Bill introduces us to this absolutely bizarre idea that selfishness and self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our problem. And most of us read it rhetorically, and it goes in this ear and it comes out this ear, and we don't ever internalize this and see it. Some of you do. Some of us who are still walking dumpster fires years into the program, some of us miss it completely. That perhaps there was something else bigger than that. So let me ask you another rhetorical question. Another just to ask the question: if Bill Wilson had not written the steps the way he did, it's a weird situation. Bill introduces us to selfishness and self-centeredness, and the result of that, he introduces us as the stage character. What would have happened if Bill Wilson had not put the steps next to it? I mean, the fourth and fifth step next to it. We'd have been in trouble, because there's a piece of me that wants to push back against that whole idea. I've never met anybody that willingly said, "Oh yeah, I'm pretty selfish." I've never met anybody like that. Most everybody will go, "Well, maybe there's been some times when I'm selfish, but as a general rule, I'm loving and giving. I'm that that guy." At the same time that they're doing this, look at how amazing it is that Bill Wilson put the stage character story on the actor that wants to run the whole show right there before the third step. How amazing it is that he puts 2.5 pages that don't even mention alcoholism. They're not talking about alcoholism at all. What they're talking about is that, hey, Mr. Stage Character, maybe it's possible that there's other stuff going on in your life that you were working overtime to cover up and ignore. And that's exactly what that 2.5 pages was trying to get us to see. It's fascinating that as drunks and dope fiends, we don't see that. But if you ask your wife, you ask your husband, you ask people that love you, that are close to you about that, and they'll tell you the truth. And they'll tell you, you are a stage character. You're the most inauthentic character I know. And that's a tough one to swallow. It's tough to look at that kind of stuff. I think that as long as I get clear of the addiction, I'm going to be okay. And then I wake up and realize that, hey, wait a minute, I'm not okay. I'm a train wreck. This is the reason why so many relationships in sobriety begin to fall apart at some point, because people think, our family especially thinks, that once the addiction is gone, that we'll be better, that we'll be okay. But let me ask you this, and then I promise you we're going to get on the 6 and 7. Let me ask you this. How many of y'all have ever found yourself in a situation, Pert, I'm sorry. I should have told you I wanted to talk about some of this first, but I didn't. But anyway, I'm a slimy pig. I should have just told you. I just like, but I wanted to set this stage up like this because here's the deal. Motivation is such a huge deal. If you're not motivated to this, if you're not motivated to do this, you'll discount all of this stuff. You're just going to go, I don't need to do this. And the reality of this stuff is just, um, how many of you have been sober for a period of time, no booze, no dope, and then at some point in time you began to slide sideways, and all of a sudden you're mixed into things that are goofy. Maybe you get mixed into a little porn or a little buying stuff you don't need, or you're guys. I bought hundreds of CDs in the CD days. I bought hundreds of CDs I never even listened to. I bought clothes I don't wear. I buy tools I don't use. I own 3 airplanes. Now, come on, y'all. I mean, it doesn't take a mental giant to know, no, there's not a human on earth that needs 3 airplanes. Why? Why? And people would ask me, and I go, oh, I don't know. It's a pretty plane, isn't it? I don't know. Until later. Until I started looking at the steps and I started looking at closely at this, and then I began to realize, hey, wait a minute, Myers, you're doing a lot of stuff to scratch an internal condition. Restless, irritable, and discontent. Remember that? Well, it comes back, and when it does, you go, I go, and you realize you can't go back and drink a beer, you can't go back to the dope house, you can't do this stuff. So what's going to scratch it? Well, I don't know. This is the internal piece of this. Is what all of this is about. How can I live a life that I don't even understand? And that's why this stuff gets to be so amazing. So we do a 3rd step prayer asking to be relieved of the bondage of self, and then we move over to this 4th and 5th. We do 4th and 5th, and we begin to see, most of us for the very first time, that we are indeed selfish and dishonest and fearful and prideful. Prideful was a huge one for me. How many of y'all have ever, I used to think, people say, Myers, your pride's going to kill you. I'm going, dude, I'm not prideful. I'm not. And I'm thinking pride means I'm looking in the mirror, making sure that my beard's straight and that I'm, pride simply means how other people see me. Do I ever make decisions? Do I ever do things based on how I want to be seen? Well, yeah, I do. And once you begin to see that, once you begin to realize that, then you go, crap. And so at the end of a piece of inventory, that column 4, which is the most important part of this thing, on column 4, you begin to get a lineup of the fact that maybe I am selfish and self-centered. Maybe I am driven by all of these other things like that. Maybe I do need to mature and grow up. How many of y'all in sobriety have ever gotten into a goofy conversation with somebody and you ended up getting mad and you're jumping up and down and shaking your fists, and I mean, you're acting like a petulant 3-year-old, and it was nothing important. It was nothing that big. And that's exactly what it looks like when you're trying to play the stage character like that, when selfishness plays a role. Somebody asked me one time, they said, Myers, I'm confused. How do you know when you're selfish? How do you know when selfishness is playing a role in your stuff? I said, just retell the story. I've got a huge resentment against Katie, and what I'm going to do, and I'm finally going to get honest with it on an inventory, and I'm telling them about this kind of stuff. And the way to tell if I'm resentful about Katie, what the problem is that I just recouch it. If Katie did what I wanted her to do, when I wanted her to do it, the way I wanted her to do it, would I have a problem with him or her? No, not at all. Why would why? She's doing everything that I want her to do. That's the perfect example. But guys, when y'all do that with every one of those resentments, all of a sudden you'll realize, wait a minute, there's not a single resentment on this list that I don't also now see that selfishness played a role in, because I'm trying to get everybody to do that. My parents, my employer, my employees, everybody. I'm trying to get them to do that. So crap, what do I do? What would have happened if Bill Wilson had written the steps? He did 3, 4, 5, and then he stops. Well, let me tell you what would happen. You'll be a walking, nervous, knucklehead, because what's going to happen is you won't be able to unsee what you've seen. Finally, after decades of being this stage character guy, inauthentic to the core, uh, uh, finally at this point you're going to go, how do I change? Well, you just exert more willpower and you just change. Once you've seen it, you just fix it. Oh, really? I remember Joe McQuaney of Joe and Charlie one time asking me that question. Joe sponsored my sponsor, and so I had a good bit of time with him. And he said, Myers, he said, you're driving me crazy. He said, do you think that you can overcome self by exerting more self? And I said, damn straight, Skippy, you bet. And I remember him looking at somebody, and he rolled his eyes and he looked back at me and he said, Myers, he said, I worry about you, son. And I went, well, sorry. And later, once I started doing these steps again, I awakened to that, and I realized that he was right. You're not going to exert willpower. This has got nothing to do with willpower. If you want to change who you are, the only step in there that's going to work is 6 and 7. So let's read this real quick. I want to. Step 6 on this said we were entirely ready to have God remove all of these defects of character. Now, Joel, let me just ask you this question like that. He left the choice up to us. If we don't want to leave it, if we don't want to have it gone, we don't have to have it removed. I mean, we just live with it. Here's the deal, though. By the time you've done inventory, most of us have matured enough in our own recovery that we've begun to realize that there is this thing called recovery, that we're beginning to sense what that's all about. And then we get to look at this and decide. I see people that have co-occurring problems with porn. I see this all the time where they go, well, but I don't want to get rid of the porn. Okay, rock on. Let me ask you, how spiritual do you feel after a foray into porn land? I've never met anybody that goes, I've never felt closer to God as they stand up from a computer screen. Y'all understand? I know that's a little weird, but y'all get what I'm saying. It's just, we get to decide what that looks like and what we want to get rid of like that. The big question was, do we want more? Do we want a different, changed life? Do we want the old ideas to go away? Do we want to experience something that is new? Look at what it says on the step. 2 paragraphs, and it couldn't be simpler. We've emphasized willingness as being indispensable. Are we now ready to let God remove from us all the things which we have admitted are objectionable? We get to pick what's objectionable. And hopefully by the time you do that inventory, you'll admit it. You'll look at it and realize that the things that you co-signed, the things that you said, it's no big deal, are a big deal. Because we're on a different path. We're on a path that could transform everything about our life. And we stand at this turning point, and we get to decide, do I want to turn and be different, or do I want to just stay right where I am and continue to make excuses for behavior that's atrocious? I sometimes think, based on the men that I've sponsored over the years, I think that sometimes that's what we excel at. That's what we're the best at, is rationalizing bizarre behavior. It's just crazy. Can he now take them all, every one? If we still cling to something we will not let go, we ask God to help us be willing. And then they're going to do this prayer next, and I'm going to do it, and we'll circle back and close all this stuff up. But in this prayer, it says, when ready, we say something like this: my Creator, I'm now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. We don't get to pick it. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. And then we've completed step 7. Listen, at the center of this is humility. Can I be humble enough that I'm willing to put it out there for God to remove? But you have to be humble enough to do that. Humility is a crazy kind of a deal like that. There's a bunch of stuff that we drag into this deal, a bunch of it, and my short list that I love to read and sometimes is this: are we willing to move towards these ideals? What about lust? Am I willing to address that? Do I have the humility to say these lustful thoughts of mine are getting in the way and separating me from my Creator? How about self-righteous anger? I mean, there's a lot of men that I've known over the years, that's old Myers too, that used to justify all kinds of anger like this because I thought I was justified in it. Gossip. Bill Wilson wrote articles about it in the 40s and 50s where he talked about how many people died of gossip, just people saying goofy things that they shouldn't be saying and talking about. Gluttony. Some of us how many of us gained a bunch of weight I got sober and gained 30 pounds. I'm eating a half a gallon of Bluebell ice cream every night. I'm built like a jackrabbit, and I got this big old head and a big old neck like that. I'm 30 pounds on this little bitty jackrabbit frame. And gluttony, yeah. Maybe one of my favorites, procrastination. How many got, the big book says in the 12 Intelligence calls it sloth in 5 syllables. It always makes me laugh. Sloth in 5 syllables. Procrastination is amazing. How many of us just keep putting off stuff that we know we need to do? I need to go to the gym. I'll get to it. I need to make an amends. I'll get to it. I need to try to get involved and help somebody. I'll get to it. The procrastination is a bear, and it'll short side. The pride's another one that gets in this thing. Once we get to a place where we're willing to look at the humility part of this thing and go, hey, am I willing to be humble about this stuff and just simply admit that I don't really know all of this stuff that's going on. I don't really know all of this. Most of us, not sure what it's like in girl land, but in guy land, most of us are convinced that if we picture where we want to be, we can move towards where we want to be. But sometimes our pictures are slanted. They're weird, and we don't really know what it is. Wouldn't it be cooler and more peaceful if we could just say, hey, God, I'm not really clear where I need to go. I'm not really clear what I need to do, what I need to say, who I need to help. Whatever. I just this willingness to let go of the tiller that is your life and let God run that. It takes some courage to do that, and that's the reason why I love the fact that we have a way to do this. We have a system on these meetings where we could talk freely and openly about some of this stuff. To see, I'm telling you. One of the things that we never seem to talk about in our room is that it takes courage to move towards things that we're not certain about. And sometimes you just have to do it. But part of that stuff is if you're motivated and if you can just simply be cool with the idea that maybe there's something pretty sweet right there, almost in front of me, but not quite. And all I have to do is just simply do what I need to do and move towards it. And then I remember Mark Houston in a talk he did a jillion years ago. He said, one of the things that gets me about people and spiritual stuff is we get on a spiritual path and we stay in one place, but we don't realize that the ideal situation is to recognize that if you're the same place in a year from now that you are this year, you're missing it. Spiritual stuff is a growth process, and it's something that you'll start here. That's the reason why Bill Wilson started it the way he described it like that. You got to be willing to start. You got to be willing to move towards something. But once you get on that path, I wish we had unlimited amount of time and energy so we could talk about nothing but about that. About how many of us have had that experience where we crept in, gently moved into an idea of what God was about and what our Creator was about, and then we moved from there into something that became over the years more and more profound, more and more worth moving towards. I mean, it's just the coolest sort of a thing. So most of us who are busy in AA, who are around enough, we see them so often that we never stop seeing it. I had a guy in a Bible study one time a year or so ago that said, we said something about miracles, and he looked at me and he said, Myers, you're smiling. What are you smiling about? And I said, well, I like miracles. And he said, the guy said, I like the idea of miracles, but I've never seen one. And I started laughing then, and another AA guy that was in that Bible study said he started laughing too. And he said, what are y'all laughing about? And I said, dude, I see miracles every day. Every day I get to watch walking dumpster fires move from I'm going to die of this to something that is just simply transformational. I watch their families heal. I watch I mean, yeah, we ought to rename this program Miracle 101 because that's what it is. It's just crazy. Um, Let me ask y'all a question real quick. Some of you have been, especially if you're coming to these meetings pretty regularly like that, you've had experiences with step 6 and 7. I think that of all of the things that have happened to me in the program, there's nothing that has been more profound and more meaningful than when I looked and realized what a true dumpster fire really was. When I looked at that inventory and I realized how selfish I was and all of these things that I was manifesting, and then began to realize that over a period of time the anger was going away and then the peace was coming back. I mean, some of us have lived life that are so full of anxiety, so full of anxiousness, and it's always there. I get up with it. I go to sleep with it. I get that. And I'm not knocking it, man. I'm telling you, I live that nightmare. But there's nothing sweeter than to get up in the morning and sit on the edge of the bed and scratch your old scraggly beard if you got one and just look out the window and your shoulders are still low and you're okay. It's just going to be okay. I don't have to control or regulate what's going on. I don't have to be the big guy. I can just sit back and let God take charge of this kind of stuff. But let me just throw this in there really, really quick before I get out of here. How many of y'all, what would happen if 6 and 7 wasn't there? Let me paint this real quick picture. If 6 and 7 wasn't there as a step, what you would end up doing is you would end up seeing who you are authentically in step 5. You would see who you are, and then your head would crawl into the picture, and you would do everything you can to tell the story, retell the story, recatch the story, depending on what it is, and you would pretty soon repaint it all so that you are I'm the victim. I was a good guy and they just spoiled me. Whatever. You'll tell this story until you own nothing of it again. And once you own nothing of it, where's your motivation to make amends in 8 and 9? It will be non-existent. You will not do it because there is no need to do it. Because really, they're the bastards. I'm okay. They're the ones that were the goofy ones like that. But y'all ever notice how your head will sell you that story? I mean, look at when something happens to you emotionally, and then look at how fast it takes you to tell the story in your head what just happened. I said this, she said that. Okay, I said this, and then she said that. And then 2 hours later, you've already said this 3 or 4 times, and now you're going, I said this, she said that, and did you notice the way she said that? And then she did, and pretty soon, I'm twisting it all up so that I can make it where it's all on her and not on me. And our head, that's our ego working overtime, and I'm telling you, it is crazy. That's the reason why that once we see the ugliness of who we really are authentically in step 5, and then they say they're not waiting on you. You got an hour, and all of a sudden you slide over there, and then you get to tell God what you're willing to get rid of. What is it that you find that's objectionable? And then once you see these things, and you ask God to get in there, just stick with it, stay with it, and then watch what happens. And then you'll be motivated to go ahead and do what you got to do in 8 and 9. You'll be motivated to practice the principles at the end of this 10, 11, and 12 stuff. But so look at how ineffective you would be if the pinnacle of everything that we do is our relationship with God in 11, and our work in step 12 as we help others. watch, pay attention to how ineffective you would be in 12-step work if you want to stay the victim. If you're always just going to sell yourself this idea, well, I've been victimized so many times. I couldn't possibly help anybody. I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that. And you'll do this over and over again. How do I know? Because I did it. Because I lived that nightmare. How do I know it daily? It's because I sponsor a sea of men who do it all the time. I'm going, guys, quit. Quit painting yourself as being this useless blob that can't help anybody like that. You think that you have to understand all this stuff. Let me tell you a real quick story. It's quick. I think I got 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Okay. So let me tell you the story like that. I got a call from a guy one time in Dallas, and a guy had turned up on his dock by a lake, drunk as a skunk, and he needed help. And they had taken him, the EMP guys had taken him and they'd put him in an ICU place in the hospital. And this guy, that my neighbor who knew I was in the program, said, "Is there any chance you could go see him?" And I said, "Sure, I'll go see him." And so I go down there thinking I know exactly what's going to happen. I'm 100% sure. I'm going to go in there. We're going to be besties. It's going to be great. He's going to get sober. It's going to be swell. Well, I go in. I give him the ICU folks said, "Hey, who are you?" And I told them, and they said, "Are you a family member?" And I said, "Well, maybe we'll be family later, but I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I thought maybe I could help him." I said, "Could you just give him my card?" And I handed my card to the guy and the nurse, and she went back and talked to him. And 10 minutes later, she came back out and she said, "He didn't want to see you." And I went, "Well, okay." And now I'm looking at the countertop and I'm going, "What the hell?" I just like, he has no idea who's there to help him. I just like, my head is going goofy. The humility is out the door completely. I mean, it's just my arrogance has all come back like this. And so I start walking for the door, and I walk clear ICU, and I get down this long hallway, and I could hear somebody walking behind me. And then I can hear somebody walking damn near on top of me. They're right behind me. And I stopped for a minute. And when I did, this lady slammed into my back and she apologized. And I turned around and I said, "That's okay. What's going on?" And she said, I was leaning against the counter. I said, "I know, I saw you in there." And she said, "I was leaning in there and I heard what you were saying, what you were doing, talking to that guy. And I wonder if I could spend a second with you." And she's looking around because she doesn't want anybody to hear her. And I said, "Why don't we go outside out there? Do you have a second you could do that?" And she said, "Yeah." And we walked outside. And as we did, she got outside and she stopped, and I turned around and she was crying. And I said, "What's going on?" And she said, I don't really know how to explain this." And she said, "My sister is a nightmare. She's holed up in a hotel right now with a bunch of crazy critters, and they're doing a bunch of crazy stuff, and she needs help. And I just don't know what to do." And I said, "Well," I said, "Buddy, let's fix it. I'll go get her if she wants to go." And she said, "I just talked to her. She's so hopeless." She said she'd do anything. And I said, "Let's just see what we can do and see what she's willing to do." So I go out, we drive down to, she says, "I'm almost off work. I'll go with you." And so we go down to, Oak Cliff. I pick up another guy that I know, another gal that I know, and she went with us. And so anyway, we walk in, grab her, get her out, get her some help, get her sober. She detoxed in a couple of days, and we got her taken care of, and she's sober today. And every 2 or 3 months, I get a call from her, asking me how I'm doing, and she's telling me this deal. So why this story is important is because at least 50 times over the years, this is one of them, I've walked into a situation where Myers, the know-it-all guy, thinks he knows exactly what's getting ready to happen. And then I am surprised by how often I walk in, get humble again, get willing to let God run the show, and then just be willing to do what God puts in front of me. And all of a sudden I find out that there's people who I never knew, who I never expected to be able to help. If this happened once in my AA career, I'd go, "Okay, super." But it's happened more times than I could count. What's necessary is to recognize and realize that as you get healthy, as you experience recovery, you're going to be put in hundreds of positions to affect change in the lives of other people. And all you have to do is show up and be willing to do that, which takes courage. Courage, number one, but it also takes humility and willingness to put yourself in a position where you're there trying to feed people. And as we feed these people, we realize that we're not there to be fed anymore. We're there to feed. And the more we do that, everything in our life shifts. Spiritually, physically, everything begins to change. And with that, Krusty Myers from Central Texas is going to shut up. And I sure love you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Myers. Thank you for your share. You were heard. Appreciate you and grateful you're here. Can we all take a moment, please? My Creator, I'm now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and to my fellows. Grant me the strength as I go out here to do your bidding. Amen. I'd now like to hand the meeting back to Myers to take us out with a prayer or reading of your choice, please, Myers.
Hey, y'all, because I'm a crusty old guy, I usually like to close with the Lord's Prayer, but I got another prayer that I fell in love with about 2 years ago, and it's just a quick and easy prayer like that. It's called the Welcoming Prayer. It's written by a cat named Father Thomas Keating. It made me, I thought it was stupid when I first read it because it starts out, welcome, 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 and it just seemed stupid to me, but the more I started reading it every day, and pretty soon I went, golly, I like that prayer, and because it sets me in a sweet spot. So if it's okay with y'all, let me just read this prayer and we'll close with that, okay? Welcome, welcome, welcome. I welcome everything that comes to me today because I know it's for my healing. I welcome all thoughts, feelings, emotions, persons, situations, and conditions. I let go of my desire for power and control. I let go of my desire for affection, esteem, approval, and pleasure. I let go of my desire for survival and security. I let go of my desire to change any situation, condition, person, or myself. I open to the love and presence of God and God's action within. Amen. Pretty sweet. Thank you, guys.